All right, today we're going to dive into the mind of one of political philosophy's most, let's say, intense figures, Thomas Hobbes. You see, he lived in an age of absolute chaos, and that led him to argue for something pretty radical, that a powerful, totally centralized state was the only way to guarantee peace. So let's get into why he thought that.
You really can't understand Hobbes without understanding this one single emotion: fear. I mean, he literally said he was fear's twin, born into a world that was already teetering on the edge of conflict. And this deep-seated anxiety, it's not just some interesting biographical fact. It is the absolute bedrock of his entire political philosophy.
In this timeline, this really frames everything. Hobbes saw some of the most violent, turbulent moments in English history. He was born as the Spanish Armada was threatening to invade. He lived through a horrific civil war that literally ended with the public execution of the king. Seeing all that chaos, it convinced him that the worst possible evil was social disorder, and the greatest good, well, that had to be absolute security. So, faced with all this turmoil, Hobbes asks this incredibly basic but profound question: what would life be like if there was no government at all? His answer became this terrifying thought experiment, and it's the real starting point for his whole theory.
He called this idea the state of nature. Now, this isn't a real time in history. It's a hypothetical. It's a look at humanity in its rawest, most unfiltered form. Completely stripped of all laws, authority, or social rules. And what Hobbes saw there? Well, it was incredibly bleak.
I mean, think about it. In this state of nature, why would you even bother to farm, or build, or create anything? There's absolutely no guarantee you'd be able to keep it. If you can't be sure of your own safety, progress is just impossible.
And without that basic layer of security, everything we think of as civilization just evaporates. Culture, knowledge, art, society itself, all of it just vanishes. Life becomes, in his words, solitary and primitive. And here's the absolute worst part. Life is defined by constant gnawing fear, the ever-present threat of a violent end. For Hobbes, this is it. This is the fundamental problem of human existence. So if that's the nightmare, how do you wake up from it? Well, Hobbes argued that people, being rational and fundamentally self-interested, would logically look for an escape route. They'd make a deal, a kind of binding agreement, a covenant, to save themselves from themselves. He called this the social contract, and the steps are actually pretty straightforward when you think about it. First, that overwhelming fear of death gets the ball rolling. Second, people all agree with each other to create a society. And third, and this is the absolute key, they willingly hand over all of their individual rights and power to a single, absolute ruler. It's a straight-up trade. You give up liberty to get security. But here's the crucial fine print in this deal. The agreement is only made between the people. The ruler isn't part of the contract. The ruler is the result of it. Now, what does that mean? It means the sovereign has zero obligations to the people and can't ever break the agreement. Their power is, by definition, absolute. So what do you call this new, all-powerful thing that the people have just created? Well, Hobbes reached into the Bible and pulled out a name that was designed to inspire awe, and maybe a little bit of terror. He called the state the Leviathan, or an artificial man. See, it isn't a natural thing, it's something we build. It's this massive construct, created by fusing together the power of every single person into one body, all for the sole purpose of keeping the peace. The choice of metaphor here is just so powerful. The biblical Leviathan was this unstoppable sea monster, so immense that only a complete fool would even think about challenging it. Hobbes picked this image on purpose, to show that the state's power had to be so huge and so terrifying that to even consider challenging it would be a kind of self-destructive madness.
Okay, so what can this sovereign, this Leviathan, actually do? Let's break down the very specific powers and duties that Hobbes says it must have.
So on one side, the sovereign has some important duties, right? Ensure safety, educate the public, make good laws. But just look at the rights on the other side. Its power can never be taken away or split up. It can't be punished by its own subjects. It gets to decide what ideas are taught, and it's the final judge in every single disagreement. The power is total. And this really shows you just how deep that power is meant to go. The sovereign isn't just a police officer or a lawmaker, it's a teacher. It literally has the duty to educate the population on the principles of obedience, to teach them that they should never even want a different government, and that rebellion is always, always wrong. I know what you're probably thinking. This sounds extreme, maybe even tyrannical.
So what on earth was Hobbes's final, stark justification for giving a government this much terrifying absolute power?
For Hobbes, it's this simple. The choice was never between a perfect government and a bad one. The real choice was between any kind of government, even a really harsh one, and the total, bloody chaos of the state of nature. When you're faced with that war of all against all, submitting to power is always the only rational choice. Anything is better than anarchy.
And that, right there, leaves us with a question that's just as real today as it was back in the 17th century. Hobbes is laying out the ultimate trade-off, freedom versus safety. So I'll just leave you with this to think about. In the quest to create order and get rid of fear, how much of our liberty is too much to give away?